These poems be long, longer. I mean, as I get, yeah, especially in this. It's 2019 in July 24th to be precise, and I post the anachronism number 2884, which is called "Then I Realized That I Had Fallen Asleep." Ellipsis. To escape, to stall, because I was downright exhausted. Ask me again about the waterbed, about how our bodies each were walls quite longer than you would expect if one were to expect. The boneless mass, the massive mess. Ask me again. I might say the same thing I always say heading home after my first graveyard shift at the cardboard factory. Large squares of cardboard are heavy. Trust. Little known fact, after the crash, all four get out of the other car and take their turns running towards mine, cursing. We were in front of the courthouse in Van Buren. Is there a courthouse in Van Buren? One had a bloody head. Another had a bloody arm. This was around 4 in the morning. I lock my doors, stay in the car, which surprisingly is still upright upon its 4 feet, not skewed in some kind of awkward, twisted angle. Well, I was facing the opposite direction, as if going back to work at the factory where the squares of cardboard outweighed the logs that I would bring inside to my grandfather's place. This heat was unnecessary, however. Everyone was hollering. The words were not nice, the ones directed at me locked in my cutlass supreme. I tried to ask if all were okay, but it just came out a whimper, and my doors were closed, each door locked. Steam was forming on the windshield. This was summer in Arkansas. Perhaps it was my agitated pulse after the slow motion of the bang and the double twist at the completely hidden intersection, an embankment, an abundantly leafy low oak that overwhelmed a stop sign, etc. This was the stuff of heartbreaks in these middle-sized towns, my inexperienced perspective. Several eons later, after 4 pairs of fists clenched and unclenched, under what was the only spotlight, a street lamp at the intersection that only a few moments ago did not exist. Did it, though? The proof would show that apparently it did. And so, thanks to which, well, no one was seriously injured, my sheepishly white cutlass was totaled. And history shows that I went on to finish undergraduate school, spent 2 years of working in a very non-gentrified downtown Little Rock, after which I moved, not to offend Northwest Ohioans, but to the armpit of the nation for graduate school, and all of this before I would possess another car of my own, which inevitably was repossessed. But that is another story. So, living in the two largest cities of my life thus far, both exemplars of what public transportation is definitely not, I spent without a vehicle a mile. But I did it. The 4 football players from Alma went home that summer night. My ticket was dismissed. The violence of the night was nothing humanly physical, despite the threats, except, of course, for that one thud-like crash as my fender slammed directly into the front passenger's door and the moving sports vehicle, overfilled with 4 bulked-out boys who were definitely not on their way back home from work, after which my car spun around 2.5 times while I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that there were bruises on my palms for the following week. My only physical injuries, thankfully. I lasted 2 more weeks at the cardboard factory. It had already been a long summer. The last I would spend in the town I lived for my first 17 years. I went back to college, back to dreamland, back to the fantasy world of my sophomore year, the year I would first start meeting a guy, the same one the entire school year, often at the top of the outdoor but walled in concrete stairwell on the side of the biology building. This happened on quite a regular basis, as it turned out, usually on weekends when both of our respective roommates were out for the weekend. He had a truck too, which meant an awkward as it might sometimes be, which meant as awkward as it might sometimes be, our meetings did not necessarily occur only on weekends when one of us were without roomies or when we were up on the side of the biology building. We don't make that clear. And now that I think about it, there were probably about as many such fun-filled, invigorating weekends as there were weekdays. Then they all lived happily ever after. That's not the end. But thank you for listening.